the entire concept of feminism at its root, what it kind of started with is like, I'm more than my pussy. And I'm just like, exactly, girl.
Hey, welcome to Town Hall, a Black queer podcast. The podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. Today's episode is feminism.
Pep, are you a feminist?
Yes. I do remember. Okay, the words when I was young, growing up, that I remember, the like politically charged words when I was growing up that I heard being used, and I couldn't necessarily define, but I knew that they were meant as bad, were communist, feminist, socialist. I mean, there's obviously other words that were bad words, but these words, I now know I have a different meaning, but I just thought, like, I would hear people saying, "Ugh, feminist," I guess the context of like the meaning that was conveyed, the subtext was like bitchy woman. Like I think that's like a bitchy, unreasonable woman who's asking for too much. That was what I thought like the definition of a feminist was when I was growing
and that was,
up.
that was your perception in the 80s and 90s?
Definitely in the 80s, probably coming into the 90s.
So when in 2004, when I got to college, or maybe 2008 when I got to New York City, I can't remember. It was in the early 2000s, before 2010. Oh my God, we're in the 20s. We're living in the 20s. This is so crazy. You ever thought that we're like in the 20s? We're like in the 20s. Because everyone like reading about the 20s, but now we're like living in the 20s. That's kind of wild. And baby, they're roaring. I see why they call them roaring 20s. Because baby, they're roaring at us nonstop. But anyway, what I was getting at is I saw these shirts that would say, "This is what a feminist looks like," and I remember thinking, I grew up obviously in the 80s and 90s as well, and I became an adult in the 2000s. And I remember thinking to myself like, "Oh yeah, a feminist is like a lady who doesn't wear deodorant and like boobs hang to her belly button, and she probably her like she doesn't like she doesn't do her hair, she doesn't wear makeup, and she hates men." But then I saw this like big buff straight guy wearing a shirt that said, "This is what a feminist looks like," and I was like, I knew that feminism is really just about believing that men and women are equal and should have equal footing in the world. Somehow I had let the insidious idea that feminism was these stinky, sweaty, mean women enter my brain as well, because that's what we saw in media, you know?
So did you have a negative connotation associated with feminism, like the word feminism, when you were younger?
Maybe not negative, but very specific. I guess negative. I mean, negative is obviously a subjective word,
Right.
but it was like it was kind of like the woman version of I got bean pies, my brother. You know what I mean? Like those like the super extra woke brother man.
Like Muslims?
You've seen the you not just Muslims, but like there's this depiction in Black media of specifically of either Nation of Islam or Black Israelites in media that is super
Always wearing a
it's
suit and a bow
almost
tie.
comically parodied. Yeah, and always like, my brother, that's the problem today with
The
these
man.
white people in your life, my brother. See, what you don't realize, my brother and my sister, is so in my mind, that parody thing that I had seen on movies like what was that movie the parody that where he go, "Keep getting away." What was that movie? I think it was like a Wayans movie.
Hollywood Shuffle
where like
or I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. One of the Wayans. Yeah.
I'm gonna get you sucker. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get you sucker. Where this character who's like parody of a Nation of Islam type person is like trying to talk to this. He's making this Black woman move out of his way so he can talk to this white woman.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
whole bit.
yeah.
And move out of my way. bitch, move. I want to talk to this blonde haired guy. I can't remember the exact lines. I haven't seen the movie in
I
literally
think he was trying
years.
to kick it
But
to a. He
my
was
idea,
spitting game, and he told the black woman to move out of the way so he could like. He went on this whole preaching thing about like loving black women and all this other shit.
yes,
And then he like moved the black woman out of the way so he could like kick it to the white girl. I think that's what it
yeah.
was.
And my idea of feminism was kind of, yes, if I recall correctly, that's exactly what it was. And in my mind, feminism was the lady version of that
Okay.
thing but about gender and not about race.
Right.
Whew.
Wow,
That was a long
we might have to edit it anyway.
made it. Baby, honey, the
We
train
went from
was
the
running local
Squannies to
on that
white
one.
girls.
Oh, real quick, by the way, real quick, everyone, a total side note, a bit of shameless self-promotion. My stand-up comedy special, Woke Man in a Dress, is available for free on my YouTube page. I released it on my Patreon exclusively a couple of months ago, and now it is for free on my YouTube page. You can go to wokemaninaddress.com, or you can just go to YouTube and type in Woke Man in a Dress, and you will be taken directly to my special, which I'm very proud of. I'm very,
You
very
should
proud
be. It's so funny, y'all. Do it, and then play it again, and
it's
leave
free.
it on loop. I don't know. I don't think you can loop videos on YouTube. I don't think
I'll
so.
find a way. Well, just come back every hour and 16 minutes
Yeah,
and redo
just keep
it.
redoing.
But anyway, so that's my idea of feminism. Feminism definitely has a I think that the world has a definite broader understanding. Have you ever heard of a fart?
A
Pep?
feminist. Yeah, that's new.
Appropriating feminists appropriating radical transphobia.
Transphobe.
It's the new term instead of
TARF, a fart.
tra-
TERF, a fart.
instead of turf. People are calling them farts now. It's a feminist appropriating radical transphobia. Because turf could still be nice, but a fart.
Wait, what are they? They're a feminists that are appropriating radical transphobia. They're not
Radical transphobia.
They're not appropriating radical transphobia. They're exhibiting radical.
Okay, maybe I got the term wrong.
Yeah, I think it's.
Well, a fart doesn't sound good.
A feminist appropriating. A feminist who is a feminist. Okay, it's a person who's appropriating feminism. They're appropriating feminism. So a feminism appropriating radical transphobe, because it's a transphobe who's radically appropriating feminism.
So feminism appropriating radical transphobe. Mm-hmm. There it is. God, yeah,
I had to.
There it is.
Woo! I thought through that one.
I got like a nosebleed. Like, oh my god! Not me using.
I do like that. I mean, I do like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I don't necessarily.
Well, it's because they started claiming turf. They started being proud of turf. They're like, I am a turf. Yeah, I'm a turf. What of it? But they're not going to start saying, yeah, I'm a fart.
Yeah, and they're not radically feminist. It's actually it's so ironic that they call many of they obviously are accepting the definition of a type of feminist, and some of them are calling themselves a certain type of feminist or saying that they're feminists, and we were acknowledging. We were giving them ground and acknowledging, yes, you are a feminist, but you're the type of feminist that doesn't like trans women. So that's not an insult to them, because they literally don't. However, it's interesting that a lot of these. I saw one of these people that have been called publicly TERFs, and I think she probably now accepts it. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Online, so famously, and there was a whole set of information and sort of doctrines and basically not jargon, but things that they were saying, quotes that they were saying about trans people. And I think it was Christopher Rufo, who is the architect behind the attack on critical race theory, who is also the same architect behind, political architect in terms of literally writing a handbook and sending it out, basically taking the notes on fascism that circulated in South America that were brought to the U.S. and then appropriated by Hitler and the Nazis in the 30s and 40s, taking all of that and restructuring it to dehumanize and attack Black people and trans people by way of saying critical race theory. We're gonna demonize critical race theory. We're gonna call it something that it's not, and then ascribe it to everything else that's Black. And then people will they'll be eliminating themselves, and they'll be eliminating this. They'll let them work. And so he did that. And he's doing the same thing to trans issues by calling, sort of re-physicalizing the trans experience and saying that it's all about body and like literally just like genetics, and it's not. Anyway, Christopher Rufo. I don't want to say his name too many more times, but he's also now serving on the board of education in Florida.
He's like Candyman. He said too many times he'll pop up behind you.
He's now serving on the board of education in Florida, helping on the board of a certain college, a liberal arts college in Florida. Can't remember what the name of it is. That was a liberal arts college that was like really open and like progressive and accepting of people of different identities. And he went through and he's going through and systematically eliminating all of the courses on feminism and African American studies and all those things.
I saw this.
And so that's Christopher Rufo. He's young.
Oh my God, he's so young.
Him.
I'm looking up now. Yeah. He's very young.
He is the person.
Jeez, Louis, this guy's. I expected like a 60-year-old man. This man is 30. He's not even 40.
So let me tell you what he did. Stop. I was yelling at Google. Sorry. He appropriated. Yeah, it's gonna be my baby because I'll never have a family. He appropriated the public thoughts and these like notions and quotes and things of these feminists, the stuff that he's using to attack trans people, and that stuff that he utilized to create this attack and design this blueprint on what Republicans should do when they're attacking trans people legislatively, which he created and disseminated to them. He took some TERF ideology and stuff that I guess had been like thoughts that had been literally quotes from TERFs, and then they called him out on it. And this one woman was like, I can't believe you're taking, my what I said about trans women. I agree with you. Let's join the fight, but you are taking something from a woman, and how are you going to be defending women? Because you're saying that you want to defend cis women from trans women. That's the messaging. And how are you going to be saying you'd want to defend women, but you're stealing from a woman and making money off of my ideas without giving me credit? You're not really helping women, and you're not moving us towards helping women. And his reply, basically, I'm paraphrasing, was like, bitch, I ain't interested in helping women. I don't care about you. I'm going to take what you have and I'm going to
plot twist.
And this was on a twist.
His response was, shut up, bitch. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Sit your bitch ass down, bitch. You're a bitch.
In
and I'm a man.
Effectively, it was that. Clearly, he didn't use that language and he didn't call her a bitch. But he was like, don't get it twisted. I have no interest in your cause or furthering women and making sure that they're equal. I think her point was, how are we going to have equality for women when a man is stealing from our ideas, and we should be on the same team with attacking trans women who are also, in her words, men who are attacking women. And he's like, don't get it twisted. I'm not here to help women.
I don't know why she thought that. She really thought she was like, he was like, bitch, get your hand out of my motherfucking face. We ain't no motherfucking allies, bitch. I'm a white, straight man.
These women who are espousing all this transphobic rhetoric, what I call transphobic rhetoric, and anti-trans ideology, and wanting to remove, making sure that doing and saying things that will result in the actions of mostly trans women is who they're attacking. Trans masked folks and trans men being sort of discredited and trying to delegitimize the existence of trans men by just calling them confused lesbians, and then turning around and saying that trans women are just men that are trying to get into women's spaces, and saying stuff like that they know will result in things like saying that there's going to be a bathroom genitalia check, or looking at people's estrogen and testosterone levels to decide whether or not they can like go into a women's space. That negatively affects cis women. So in the impact of that is, in addition to hurting trans women, it also impact cis women, because the impact of that is you're not allowed to have bodily autonomy. And if we're talking about women's rights, bodily autonomy is very, very important, high up on the list. So these people who are calling themselves feminists are actually furthering the cause and the patriarchy that wants to eliminate bodily autonomy for all women, cis and trans, which I think is just ironic. I know that was a long way to get to that point, but that was my point.
Y'all, we're taking the long way everywhere today, okay? Everywhere we're going today, we're taking the long route. So if you're not willing to get into it, then honey, get into it. By the way, the interesting thing about this idea of like trans women are attacking women, I just want to give some numbers to y'all. So based on what study you're using, you can either use Williams Institute from UCLA, or you can use a lot of different, anywhere between 1.4 to 2.5% of America is trans women or trans femmes, or people who were assigned male at birth who identify as trans and on the feminine perspective of that.
Okay.
There just are not there is no attack on cis women. There's not enough people. That would be a war that would be lost instantly, because what are you going to do with anywhere between on the low end 1.4%, on the high end 2.5%, depending on what study you're doing, identify as trans feminine?
I think
so. There's no there. The attack is this is in my opinion, this is an easy distraction so that politicians can do stuff like Plan 2025. Which I don't know if you guys have heard about Plan 2025, but it's just basically an attempt to get by the I can't remember the institute. I'll get their information in a second, but it's just a plan to put in a Republican into office and then give them more power than a president should ever have.
Listen,
and I recommend you all Google it. They always try to keep us distracted.
I agree. I think that
I'm sorry, it's called Project 2025, not Plan. It's called Project 2025.
I think that speaking of like not wanting to distract us from it, I really do think that we have to be super clear about our language, and that I think what I'm picking up is not so much that they think that trans women everywhere are going to like activate and like physically attack people. The attack is that they feel like some cisgender women are expressing the fear mongering is that a man is someone that they're calling as a man, which they're saying trans women are going to come in and physically assault them, which is an attack, of course. That would be considered an attack if that were to happen, which we know it's not. And it's not, because even if there were more trans women, it's not happening. Even if there were
That's not
50% of us, it's not happening. That's the most important thing, I think, is like, that's not happening at all. It hasn't happened. It's not happening. But even with the smaller numbers of people, you know, that is a red herring. It's just not true. But then in addition to that, the other thing that I hear from cis women is that what I'm hearing it as an insecurity, I'm observing it as an insecurity, is this feeling of the replacement, that cis women are being replaced by trans women. And I hear that a lot in you know, like conversations with black women who are, you know, sort of like the turf version, the black turf, I guess, or black fart.
farts, the black farts.
I can't. I don't know if I can.
We're calling them farts.
I can't.
We're calling them farts.
I feel away because I don't.
You don't like farts. I don't like farts either.
I can't say what I was about to say on camera. I have a problem saying that to black women. But the black women who are transphobic, I hear them expressing a frustration. It seems like most of their frustration is in relation to the black men, or men in general, but black men, and wanting to, what they're saying, they want to protect black men from women, and they want to protect themselves from being replaced by women. Trans women, like they don't want to, they're comparing themselves to trans women and well, we're the natural ones and we are the ones who have better, and you're trying to take our men. When I hear black women talk in a way that's transphobic in general, a lot of times I've heard it through that context. It's not so much about I'm concerned about sports. I don't hear Black women sitting around talking about not being able to have their daughter on the team, or you know what I mean. It's mostly like
Yeah,
being
I've
replaced.
definitely noticed that there's a lot of different. When I say attack on cis women, I don't mean like a literal physical arms war. What I mean is there's different conversations. One is about these bathrooms and this idea that that trans women are trying to somehow touch your children. And then I've seen also the same thing where like what trans women are trying to take your men. I've seen this from a lot of the transphobia in the Black community. That's the more I see there.
Yeah,
And then in the white transphobia,
the
the
white
white farts, and I noticed the white farts tend to be talking about these bathroom ideas and these sports things and where their kids are going to play. Um, Also, they just banned. Okay, this is a hearsay. I just saw a friend talk about this online, so I didn't do any research on this, but I saw a thing that trans women were banned from
yeah, chess.
playing
Yeah,
chess.
the National Chess Association.
And I'm like, I did not know chess was gendered. I didn't even know chess was a gendered
Yeah,
sport. That's wild, right? Chess being gendered is wild,
I
right?
tweeted about that. Yeah, it really does. People who like are proponents of that, and
Isn't that is it chess being gendered misogynistic? Am I
that's
crazy?
exactly what I'm saying. Like they're saying, are we saying that women are not equal in even in playing chess? It's like not even. I'm not going to say that playing chess is not athletic because I don't want to, or that it's not a sport. I can certainly concede that chess is a sport in terms that it's like a game of competition, obviously, but some games of competition are more physical than other. And I generally associate sports. And when we're talking about this is what I'm saying. Like at first they were like, we want to use the bathrooms. When that didn't work, they were saying we want to keep trans girls out of the locker rooms. And then when they got that, then they moved to we want to keep trans girls out of playing in sports at all. Before it was like you can play on the sports team, but you just can't change in the locker room. Now it went to like you can't even be in the sport. We don't care what locker room you use. You're not going to be in the sport because you have an advantage and you're winning over all the other girls, which is definitely not true. It's definitely not happening. And the number one witness that they use in many of the hearings and in their evidence, so-called evidence about cis girl losing to a trans girl, it was a lie because she beat the trans girl in competition twice. And so like that was wrong. But saying that the trans girls are going to be, if you allow them in the competition, they're going to win all the competitions. And that's just not fair to girls. And so that's obviously not true. And it's not happening. But that's what they said. And then they moved and said, it's just youth. We want to make sure that trans youth don't have access to the healthcare. And we think if they're taking hormones, then it's unfair advantage and it's a performance enhancing drug. So we want to not only stop them from being on the team, but now we want to stop them from being able to access gender affirming care and hormones because A, it's dangerous to our girls, and B, we don't know, we're going to protect them too because we think it's harmful to them, and it's not, which is also a lie and not true. And so then they said, but it's just trans youth. We're just going to stop it from affecting trans youth. We don't want trans youth to be able to be on sports teams and have access to gender affirming care and hormones. It's just the youth.
Which
And
in
then
Florida, we know
now
that's
it's
not
the
true because
adults.
SB
It's
two
not even
five
just the youth.
four.
It's
Well,
adults.
yeah,
They're moving up
most
to
people
age
don't know
18 and 25.
SB 254 in Florida. Well, what we don't a lot of people know is SB 254 in Florida has made it so that even trans adults cannot have their hormones prescribed by a nurse practitioner. Which, by the way, overwhelming majority of trans people and cis people who are on HRT are prescribed their hormones by a nurse
Most
practitioner.
people see a nurse practitioner. Most
Most
people
of
don't even actually see an
Yeah,
actual doctor.
exactly. Most of the times you've had a medicine prescribed to you was done by a nurse practitioner. However, this law in Florida, SB 254, has made it so that no trans people can get their hormones prescribed by a nurse practitioner. You have to go to a physician. And by the way, that only applies to trans people. If you are on HRT because of anything else that's not because you're trans, you can still have a nurse practitioner. It's only specifically for trans. But what they're doing is they're
They keep moving the
moving the
goalposts.
goalposts, but
Mhm.
not further right. but not further. They're actually moving closer and closer and closer to the point where it's before the start line and you can't even get started. So there used to be a version where they move the goalpost further and further away, but now they're moving it so close that the goalpost is now in front of the start line and you can't even enter the game. You can't even enter the race. You can't even participate in society.
Yeah.
You know?
It is obviously really upsetting, and they keep changing the definitions and how, like, they're what they say they're trying to do, and if we concede that to them and we give them this space, then it allows them to take up that space, push us out of the space, and then come further in, and we're being sort of like painted into a corner every time we concede certain ground, which is really, really difficult because we are arguing sort of these situations in good faith, and they are not. They're being disingenuous. They are using inaccurate and misleading and like incorrect information to achieve what it is that they're achieving at the legislative and legal level. My good friend Chase Strangio, who's an attorney for the ACLU, the ACLU are basically human rights advocacy through the legal system. And Chase is in charge of, or Chase is the attorney who oversees trans justice and also reproductive justice, and was arguing, just yesterday on the first, just this week, about a case that's moving up, and right now it's in the appellate court, and once they already lost at every other level, and it's now in the appeals court, and they think that it doesn't look too good about the judgment about in favor of trans healthcare being removed, and then it's going to go to the Supreme Court where they're already sitting, like it's a conservative court, and we pretty much know how they're going to rule given their recent history.
Yeah.
So it's
track record.
The thing is that, not to sum up too much, but like we can see that feminism, and I believe that feminism and racism and transphobia and homophobia, all these things are like so connected to the not only the patriarchy, like the binary, which serves the patriarchy, but after having done Transparent, the play that I did this year, and learning more about Hitler and how the Nazi rise to power, and then I watched a really great video by Kat Black, sort of contextualizing and framing, like 4 years ago, the rise of the new like nationalism, white nationalism in the United States. It's really it's a very long video, but it's really interesting YouTube video by Kat Black. We can see.
I love Kat Black. We should have Kat Black on the podcast.
I would love to have her
Kat
on.
Black is really
we can see the comparison between fascism in Nazi Germany and then what's happening today. And fascism really, 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 really needs a very strict binary, whether it's rich and poor, black or white, Jew or Gentile, gay or straight, male or female, so that they can operate and always have someone be oppressed. There's always a person who's going to get and a person who's not going to get. And that's feminism is like, all these things are being co-opted, and used. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. We got a lot to say about feminism. We have some guests too.
Well, we're not the only ones that have a lot of things to say about feminism. We have a lot of people. We have a few people who are going to join us today. Two folks in particular. One of them is a social impact leader and a diversity educator who works in the nonprofit arena, and they're going to speak to us on the difference between radical and intersectional feminism. So let's please listen to Kori Beaman.
My name is Kori Beaman. My pronouns are she, hers, hers, and I identify as a queer cisgender Black woman. I am a talent solutions partner. I also work in the nonprofit sector, specifically around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've been in nonprofit since I was little, but I ended up doing nonprofit for an HIV and AIDS organization. Did that for about 7.5 years, and then started to look for something new. And the company that headhunted me while I was looking for a new job. I went on an interview. I didn't get the job that they had put me forward to, but I was very curious about their practices. So I asked the right questions, and the CEO of the organization, which is called Diverse Force, and their partner reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to work for us?" And I said, "Sure." So I started working as a contractor for a little bit in diversity recruiting, and then came as a full-time remote worker within diversity recruiting for executive level positions. When did I know I was queer? I would probably say, in retrospect, when I was like 11, but not until I was an adult that I was able to actually identify and name what it meant to be queer, because it wasn't like, oh, my sexual orientation or my interest, involving my heart and my body wasn't necessarily male or female. I just always kind of knew I was a little bit different. And then growing up into a space of doing work with HIV and AIDS, it really kind of honed into me to understand who I was and how I identify as a queer woman. So I probably would say about my 20th year of living, I was like, oh, I'm queer. I know what it means to be queer. To be queer, I don't adapt to heteronormative perspectives. Some days I feel a little more androgynous than others. I don't feel as though I have to fit into this pretty pink version of what societal standards are of a woman. And so I kind of understood that it's okay to be myself and not always be the picturesque version of a woman. A society, and I would say a Western society, specifically speaking of the United States, because I could go on and on about, how other cultures view women, but a Western society view of what a woman is to be is supposed to be, a woman's supposed to be soft. I hear words like nurturer, caregiver, seen and not heard, those traditional societal norms that have been placed specifically from the perspective of what a white woman is, but even more so for being a woman of color, specifically me being a Black woman, because I can only speak as a Black woman, a cisgender Black woman who, in my experiences, is to be very submissive and not show dominance and not in a perspective, give dominance. I'm supposed to have according to Instagram, I'm supposed to have my body right. My hair did, my nails done. Those relative things that are considered to be beauty standards of what a woman is. So it's multifaceted for sure. I feel like the majority of that perspective comes from patriarchy. But I also feel as though it's driven from social economical standings as well. I feel as though more women who make a certain amount of money or live in a specific area, they have the right to be more dominant and more forward because that's what's allowed, society allows of them. And that's what they've earned and climbed to the top to kind of create. So I think it's patriarchy, yes, but I also think it's social economical as well. Let me throw a random number. If you make $600,000 a year, nobody's going to question what you do or how you do it as a woman because you have the money to tell people. You're not going to tell me. But if I'm, making $29,000 a year and I'm a CNA and I, live in what's considered the hood, I'm not necessarily provided or with the resources for me to be confident in who I am. The biggest divide between them is the belief that there's a difference, right? Why do these two women have to be pigeonholed into these? And again, these are hypotheticals, but why do they have to be pigeonholed into their identity based upon those minimal factors? They could still be exactly the same woman. However they show up and represent themselves, they can still be the same women. But I feel as though there are so many barriers and boundaries placed upon the woman who has a lesser income because they're supposed to be away and pity themselves versus the woman who has, again, the resources at her leisure to be and say and do whatever she wants. Access is limiting in so many ways when it comes to being the best version of yourself, right? There are more people, and speak particularly women, when it comes to access and resources, the limitations specifically for Black women are definitely higher than they are for any other, I would say, women of color, but I would say in general, like, it's so much harder. I don't even want to say harder. The challenge that is placed upon us as women it's grander, I would say, in the space of having to create those opportunities and those avenues of access for ourselves consistently. I feel like feminism is a buzzword. I like to look at it how people think of corporate jargon. There's feminism, you throw it out there, and I think a lot of people tend to forget the basis of feminism. But for me, I believe it is more than just women empowerment. It is understanding lived women experiences and being able to speak to those experiences, whether or not I've experienced them myself. Right. So I feel like that to me is what it is, like the lived experiences of women. And I'm saying women, not just, cisgender or transgender. I'm saying women, those experiences of all of the different types of women. That's what I see feminism as, and embodying it and embracing it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Western society has a very warped or skewed vision of what feminism is. And I think that they sometimes kind of transverse that with womenism. They're like, oh, yes, I believe women can do anything they put their mind to, and it's great. But it's like, all women? Are we saying all women? Are we being inclusive with that? And so I think that, when I think of feminism, my brain in the most recent time goes to the pink hat experience, right? Everyone saw these women marching and they were wearing these pink hats and they were like, yes, women are really taking back. And I'm like, this is really performative. This is a show. And I think that it goes further than just being able to knit a crochet pink hat, throw it on your head and be like, women can do anything. So I think that what I try to bring when I talk about feminism and I talk about the experiences of women, diverse women, I try to put people's mindsets and their thinking into a place to say, hey, how can I be empathetic and aware of myself through the lens and experiences that women experience on a day-to-day basis? And how can I speak to it and advocate, right? Because it's about advocacy. How can I have positive advocacy behind those experiences that are varying for women, all women? As a young Black woman myself, I think that it's about making space at a table for everyone. We're really on this. I feel like my generation, and my generation being like 30 something millennials, I feel like, we're constantly trying to create this space of doers and action-based people. We really don't know how to pull from that. And so in my mind, I think that it should be a beautiful combination of women of all colors, transgender women, LGBTQ women, who are allies and sit in that space. I think it should be women who maybe are a slight older, who have no qualms or fears of sharing their story. Because I think that when we come together, young and a little bit older and a little bit young, we have this really great passing of the guard to be able to be transparent and say like, okay, I know that I experienced this when I was 15 and I had no idea that my own mother or my aunt experienced that at the same age, but we never talked about it. And so I think that the conversation needs to be inclusive of varying ages, varying social economic backgrounds, and varying cultural backgrounds as well. I saw more white women coming together to make these marches versus seeing there were women of color behind the scenes. I actually know a woman of color who helped organize the march in Philadelphia. And I didn't see her in any publications. And not to say that she was seeking that, but it's like, if it wasn't for this one Black woman, I don't know if the event would have even happened. And to just say that, there's so many instances where I say, if it wasn't for that one Black woman, X, Y, and Z would have never happened. And it's so true. It's so common to see that there is this there are these women of color behind the scenes making things happen, and they're never given the flowers and the accolades that they should be receiving in the moment. Look at the beauty standards when it comes to media, right? I could have a big butt. I could have, nice sized breasts. But when it comes down to it, if I don't look like Kim Kardashian, I'm just going to be categorized and hypersexualized. But on Kim Kardashian and women who get those injections and fillers and all of that to look like me, oh, it's beautiful. It's trendy. It's cutting edge. And you're like, okay, but I have those same features. And I think that internally for young Black women, it makes it so hard for them to appreciate what they already have. Like they're working so hard to be something else. And it's a constant pull to really understand, like, okay, yeah, I have thick thighs. Okay, I have a little booty. There's nothing wrong with my little booty. I don't have a big chest. It creates this really toxic, personally for me, a toxic perspective that makes me go, what are we teaching ourselves and the women coming up underneath of us? Media and in our like social culture, we've been pushing the terminology of body positivity, right? But embodying body positivity means that it's okay to sometimes be like, I love my body, and sometimes to be like, gosh, I do not like the way I look today. And that's okay. Love is always is not something that isn't allowed to be stop and go, right? I can have moments where I'm happy with the way that I look, and I can have moments where I'm just like, oh, there's a little bit of pudge right here. If only I can get it go. I think that we should talk more so, or the solution should be more about embracing, right? Take out body positivity and say body embracing. My body is mine, and I love it. Even when it lets me down, like for instance, I'll be transparent. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I was diagnosed at 31, and my body has limitations where I'm just like, gosh, as an autoimmune disease, it is really frustrating to, see things that happen to my skin that I can't control, or see my hands contort in a way that I can't control, or my feet too. But it's like, I still embrace the body that I have because it's mine. It's wholly mine. Nobody else can tell me what to do with it, tell me how to use it, where to put it. It's my body. So taking ownership of our bodies, I think, is the biggest solution-based thought that we can put into messaging. Your body's yours. All my life, when I was younger, I would probably say like middle and high school, right? So we're talking like early 2000s, like 1999, early 2000s. I was really pushing to not be brown skin. I didn't think I was pretty. All the light skinned girls got all the attention. All the light skinned girls, especially if they were light skinned and had good hair, that's a whole nother conversation. But if they were light skinned and had good hair, it was equated to pretty. And that takes us all the way back to the brown paper bag test. Back in the day, if you were lighter than a brown paper bag, you were passing. You were considered beautiful. And so I now look at my skin and I look at how pretty it is and how, it's not dark, it's not light, it's just right there. And I'm like, it's so unique. It's unique. And I look at beautiful light skinned women, and I look at some of the most beautiful dark skinned Sudanese women that have this richness to their skin where I'm just like, oh my goodness, you are onyx. You are so beautiful. And that's why I love like diversity of shades with people of color, because you can have somebody who is, you know, very, very, very dark and their skin is just this richness. But you can also have somebody who has a beautiful, creamy, like mocha color skin. And you're just like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see the rainbow of colors that make up women, humans, people in general. So colorism, I think, within the spectrum of feminism is being able to address it head on, right? Why does it always have to be in a friend group? Oh, that's the light skinned girl, or that's the dark skinned girl. Why do we have to kind of have these dynamics when it's like, no, that's my friend who's a beautiful artist. That's my friend who, you know, she runs track. Like, there are other qualities of women that are more than just the color that they have on their skin. And so I think that we have to address it head on. And if we're in spaces where we see it, again, that key aspect of feminism, being an advocate, also means being able to be vocal and speak on things that aren't, for me, you know, appropriate in spaces where they shouldn't live. Why do we have to talk about color? I get frustrated when I see celebrity photos and I can clearly tell that they have been edited to make that person lighter. And I'm like, why are we doing that? So I think that, again, it's our job, and I do it all the time, to call it out. Call out when stuff is wrong. I think that that's also being a feminist or an ally of a feminist, you know, because again, people need to understand that feminism is about women experience, but being an ally to feminism is being able to say, hey, I don't think that that's right. And I think that more people should be exposed to the fact that this is not right and offer a solution. Like, hey, did you notice that People magazine lightened the skin of Beyonce? Why are we doing that? That's not her skin tone. And vice versa. Why is Kim Kardashian on Vogue magazine 10 shades darker than what she really is? And you can say, oh, it was makeup, it was that, but it's a misrepresentation of women, which is something that feminism is consistently trying to bring attention to. The misrepresentation of women is the biggest issue consistently, especially in America. So, you know, I try to keep myself really, you know, in the loop. And I try to say that my algorithm on social media has gotten so perfect that it keeps me out of like the stuff that triggers me. But my algorithm definitely pointed me towards these cisgender Black women who were like, I'm not using the term cisgender. I'm a woman. And anybody else and I just, honestly, I was like, how? Like, how are we having this conversation where we as Black women are pitted against each other so much? Literally, we're thrown into this really toxic energy that wants us to not be supportive of one another. And it frustrates me. So when I heard this chatter about, you know, trans women, and one of my very, very, very good friends is a trans woman. And my experience with her and her transition has not only been eye-opening for me, but it allowed me to truly understand, like, we are sisters. You are my sister. I don't care what anyone else says. I'm going to support you because, yes, you may not experience a menstrual cycle like I do, but I will never understand or experience your transition. And in that, we are the same because we are still women. And that, like, to me, for the women, my message to the women, the Black cisgender women who are vilifying transgender women and Black transgender women, we have to understand and respect one another with love, because transgender women, their experiences, their oppressive experiences, and the rate in which trans women are dying by suicide and by murder, Black women specifically, is so triggering that there needs to be a space for more acceptance versus hate. To some degree, there are some women who are like, yes, I'm not at the bottom. But I think it's a lack of understanding. Just because something is different to you and different to how society has told you it's supposed to be, doesn't mean that it's any better or makes you any better. And that's the thing that I can't wrap my head around is it's like, why would you, being in the place that we have systemically been as Black women, why would you then use your position and the power that we have? Because sometimes people don't understand the truth of being at the bottom. Okay. Because being at the bottom means you're the foundation. You hold it all together. You hold it up. So when people intend for it to be something negative, I embrace it and say, sure, I'll be at the bottom because without me, you'll go nowhere. You have no top. So I'll be at the bottom if that's what it is in your mind and you need me to be. But when it comes to trans women, why not pull on that support and say, this is my sister. We're in this struggle together. We're in the trenches together and we're going to do this together to be stronger. I feel like that's a thing that cisgender Black women who are providing negativity towards my trans sisters, you're missing the divisiveness of what society is trying to make you all do. You're missing the moment where we could be building instead of tearing each other apart. I would love to see a movement that involves support, a movement that involves open, transparent conversations. And I would love to see that building or that structure come from a very genuine place, right? I think that we tend to shy away from things that we don't know, and our innate ability as women to talk about like what we're fearful of or afraid of, and create a space to be like, yes, let's sit down and let's just have a conversation. I mean, that's why I think so many things are, messed up in this world, is because there's not enough time to sit down and talk and learn and be open and receptive. That key word of being like receptive of information, because we sit through mess all day, every day. Social media, the news, if you ever turn it on, the conversations of our peers. We sift through a bunch of mess, but intentional conversation that is created between cisgender women, cisgender Black women, transgender women, queer women, bisexual women, lesbians, having and heteronormative women, having a space to really just have a conversation and just talk. Because we as women, we know we love to talk, but we could have a conversation that is receptive, that is not necessarily a transaction, just back and forth. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? But more intentional of like, I want to hear what you have to say and I want to learn from you. I think that for cishet white women, there are so many women that I know who genuinely are like, I am an ally. I support you as a Black woman. I support your struggles, and I love you. But then there are some cishet white women who are like very performative in that space, and they just say it because they feel like it's the right thing to say. And I put a Black card up on my Facebook profile, so I care. Like I remember during the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement, during COVID, I had random people I hadn't talked to for years reach out to me on social media, and they were like, what can I do? How can I, I just want to show up for you. And it's like, my knee-jerk response was like, send me $50 to pay my bills. But in actuality, it was like, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. Why do you feel like this is now the moment to capitalize on this? Why do you feel now is the moment to talk to me when you had opportunities throughout our myriad years of friendship to talk about what it means and ask me questions about what it means to be a Black woman. You took this moment to capitalize and say, I'm going to talk about it. You could have did it on a random Tuesday night. I mean, I get it. You want to show your respect, but it's also like, why does it have to be something tragic that brings you to want to have this conversation with me? Why can't it be something positive? Like, hey, I just got a certificate from UPenn about diversity. You didn't want to reach out to me then. You didn't want to reach out to me when I was out here pushing for, more visibility about Black women and Black bodies, or more visibility about the alarming rate and death rate of transgender Black women. You didn't bring it up then. So it's like, why do we have to wait until tragedy strikes to have a conversation? When it comes to support, financial support is great. Yes, I feel like every person who is not a Black woman should just really give money to a Black woman. But I think that it's more than just financial support. It is about, physical representation and showing up. I feel like that is the biggest delineation or separating or dividing force, is that action behind those dollars is so undervalued. And having the self-awareness in spaces where, cis white women are like, I should lead this, conversation about, I don't know, the Crown Act. And you're like, no, you shouldn't. I know that you may work in government and nonprofit, but you should seek out the person, a Black woman or a hairstylist, to talk about the Crown Act. You should create, I think, white women and white men who really truly want to support, intersectional feminism and the voices of Black women and women of color should understand that their privilege is our access. I know that we talked about that earlier, but the way that people can really, show up and give support is to utilize their privilege and say, okay, I know that I am a white person in this space and this space is not for me. So I'm going to go out and get the person who this space is for. And I'm going to make them the focal point of whatever it is that we are doing, in order to make sure it's not a marketing ploy, but that it is an actual, actionable, purposeful, intentional thought in bringing awareness and amplifying Black voices.
All right, that was Kori Beaman. You can find her on Instagram at K_SINAE. That's KAY_SINAE. Thank you, Kori, for giving us your
I wonder if that's pronounced Shanae. It looks like it is. It would be if. Anyway.
What's
K
Shanae? Well, what's Shanae?
The Instagram handle, KSINAE, is K Shanae.
It probably is K Shanae, but it is. I'm gonna spell it for y'all. KY_SINAE.
Mm-hmm. Who knew that there was?
I went to public school in Atlanta, Georgia. So please don't. I'm just kidding. Anyone, by the way, Atlanta public schools are fine. I mean, actually, Clayton County had a bit of a rough spot, but that's a whole side. We did lose our accreditation for a short while.
Wow.
But,
yeah, my mind is blown. The different. It's important to distinguish, like, in addition to the waves of feminism, the different types and styles of feminism, and intersectional feminism is not a term that I usually try to view things through an intersectional lens, and so that is a part of my vocabulary. But intersectional feminism as an actual term, I have not heard much, and I have not really used. But I think that's how I'm going to adopt. So I'm not a feminist. I'm not just a feminist. I'm an intersectional feminist, and I think that's my new. Like, I want to make sure that that's out there so that we can at least have the opportunity to explain to people what intersectionality is. Because the people who are anti-trans are not, using empathy and viewing it intersectionally.
You're an intersectional feminist. We have the ifs, the turfs, and the farts.
I'm an if. I'm an if. She's a fart. I'm an if. She's a fart. I'm an if. She's a fart.
And by the way, listen, if you're a fart and you're listening to this, just stick around. You might learn something. You might learn something ever now.
I d-
Any farts here in the room?
oh,
Take a big whiff of
that
yourself.
term is tough for me.
You,
But I guess if it's like, if we are we going to be able to get it? It just feels like a little lacking in decorum. So are we going to be able to get it to the point where like journalists and platforms and outlets are going to be, when they're speaking about anti-trans women, are going to start calling them farts? Because, you know, like if we're able to actually replace the term turf with fart, and then the turfs adopt fart, them just saying I am a fart just sounds, I don't know that's gonna happen.
well, the issue, Pep, is they lack decorum. So you can't meet a lack of decorum with an abundance of it. So if you act like a fart, if it looks like a fart and it smells like a fart, it's probably a fart.
You're right. I'm
Let-
not trying to.
let's
I'm
go
not
on to
trying to project respectability politics. I'm just saying it'll be interesting to hear if they adopt the term fart the way that they've, apparently adopted the term turf.
You know, if we can get the Young Turks will be the first ones. If there's any news outlet that's going to adopt the term fart, it's going to be the Young Turks first, for sure.
Yes, I agree. Wait, in terms of how they identify?
No, using the term fart, like getting them to use the term fart. If we can get Hassan Minaj, Hassan Abi, sorry, if we can get Hassan Abi to use
but
the term
he's
fart,
no longer on the Young Turks.
We're halfway there.
And the Young Turks are no longer feminists. No.
Are they not?
No, girl. Where have you been?
I haven't. Obviously, I've not watched Young Turks in a really long time.
Yeah, they are. There is a.
Are they bros now? Are they bros?
There's something happening in political, like the sort of like YouTube-y political pundit types, where there's a blurring of the lines, and this is part of that strategy, I think, to like get people to think one thing or the other. In the grand scheme of the Candace Owens of it all, like a Black person saying stuff that is, you know, upholds white supremacy and it harms Black folks, in my opinion. The Young Turks are now that quote unquote progressive news outlet that has really, really, really cozied up with the idea of being turfy and anti-trans specifically. And you can see in some of the things that they release, some of the videos that they've been releasing over the past few months, just like sort of a move towards, I guess from really far away, it looks like they're not leftist. They are they're liberal, but not even liberal. They're like centrist liberal. So like they're really, really what people would say like the boomer sort of liberal would be, where they love they love capitalism, and they want to use the two-party system and vote for the Democrat over the Republican, and that's all you have to do.
They just hate Trump.
Yeah,
That's just the whole Trump. Thing. They just hate.
Yeah,
Trump.
but they're really, really starting to, like, Anna Kasparian has some. We don't have to get into it, but like the Young Turks has become, an ally to many people who are also transphobic and turfy.
Interesting. Quick question before we move on. Do you think Candace Owens is
a fart?
Is she? She's a fart for sure. But is she in on it? Is she like,
That's what I don't know.
Or does she truly? Because the one that was when I was like, okay, this woman is trolling, was when she was mad that Kim Kardashian put a person in a wheelchair in an ad. And she's like, this is going too far. And I was like,
that's going too far.
Well, one, it is literally. Well, not what. The reason why I was so wild was like Kim Kardashian was just advertising specifically lingerie for people who have limited mobility. So like if you need your zipper put on the side or in the front, or as opposed to hook in the back, it was an advertisement for people who have limited mobility. And she was like, this is just too far. This is ridiculous. Like, when are we going to realize that we're just dumb? We need to the whole country needs to start over.
But that's it.
Because someone acknowledged that people in wheelchairs wear lingerie. Like, what's happening?
Well, you can see that. I mean, I do think it could have been trolling, but I I read a book. The book is called The Man in the High Castle. It's a dystopian story that sort of depicts a world post-war in 1933, 1940, after the Nazis, where Hitler and the Nazis won, America lost, and Germany and Japan won, and America lost. And so the
I
Nazis
heard
are
about
in
this. I heard about
control,
this.
and New York has they bust down the Statue of Liberty and put up this Nazi thing. It's wild. I was really able to take a lot of the ideas that folks like Kat Black said in the rise of white nationalism and sort of watching what's happening in our political landscape and system today, and how fascism, you can really see how fascism in this context in America really keys in on you must be genetically perfect. And the only people who are genetically perfect are Aryans, who are blonde haired, blue eyed, able bodied, 2 legs, 2 arms. They even will test your children. I don't know if they actually did this in Nazi Germany, but in the story of The Man in the High Castle, there's testing. You have to get testing, screening, and if you have any type of physical ailment, asthma, that we want to eliminate it. So we will take your children if they have a disease or an illness or chronic illness or any type of condition. You must be genetically pure. And the first part of being genetically pure is being Aryan and white and blonde hair, blue eyed. But the second part of it is being able-bodied, not disabled, and having no physical ailments whatsoever. And other races are just born with all that stuff. But we're gonna through eugenics, I guess, breed that out of our population. We're going to make the perfect human. That was the notion and part of the ideology and some of the thinking when it came to the fascism and the Hitler brand of I'm not a political scholar, but this is the idea that comes across, and it's demonstrated really well in the story of The Man in the High Castle. And I've been observing that story, and it's so from that regard.
It kind of sounds like The Giver.
I haven't seen The Giver. I
It kind
don't
of sounds
know
like
what
the book
Giver
The
is.
Giver.
The book.
The Giver. The Giver's a. The Giver's a. I'll talk about it in a second. But, yeah.
But Candace Owens, in
The
that
Giver is a
regard,
book.
if she's upholding really becoming perpetuating of the fascist ideology, then someone in a wheelchair is not someone that we want to promote. We don't want to promote that people can be happy in wheelchairs or have it.
Mhm.
We want to only, people who are what they're saying, able-bodied, perfect, no kind of ailment, no limbs missing, any of that. That's so. I don't think she's trolling if she's a proponent of fascist ideology.
Yeah, I read it sounds like The Giver. I read The Giver in 7th grade, and The Giver is a utopian place where no one feels pain, and also anyone who's the same thing. If you're it's a children's version though. You can read it in as a kid. If you are born a little unwell, then they
take you away.
They kill. They take you away, but they don't even tell the people that 80 people die. When you get old, you just kind of you have a party and then you disappear.
I've never heard of The Givers, but it's it's a 7th grade reading level.
It's not a children's book, but it's a middle school reading. I read it in 7th grade. It's actually a really good book. I remember it was the first book I ever picked up, and I was like, I cannot.
I'm gonna have to pick it up. I'm gonna have to check into it.
It is. It's a very good book. It's a really quick read, and it's a utopian dystopian future where everyone is healthy and no one dies and no one feels pain, and then this one person is on a quest to be this seems weird. Let's figure out what's really going on. And one person is the giver, who is and one person is the receiver. So the receiver is the person who takes on all the world's pain, so that no one else has to. And then that person becomes the giver, and they pass that burden on to one selected member of society who takes on all of the world's pain. But they also get all the world's joy too.
I gotta read that book.
Real interesting book.
Okay, it is time to get into our next guest. What do you say, Bob?
Let's do it. Who do we have on the docket?
Yes, we have Xay, who's an educator and a host of Black to the Future podcast. Yes. It's a
I love Black to the Future. I love Black to the
Yeah, for
Future.
those of you who don't know, Black to the Future is a podcast that dismantles systems of oppression through a Black queer feminist lens. And Xay shares how trans and cis women can come together to build community. So let's welcome Xay.
My name is Xay De Fisher, and I use she, her, and her pronouns. I am from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised my entire life. Currently, I work at a nonprofit where we help Black and Latinx LGBTQ plus folks find jobs in community health. I am a Black transgender woman. I like to say queer just to make it a nice broad kind of stroke there, although I only am intimate with men, whether they be cis or trans. So that's kind of where I stand. I've probably been an educator for forever. However, I think in the traditional sense, probably since like 2014, when I actually I still am a music teacher in addition to all that I do. So I teach music as well to all the young Gen Zers and things like that, and they are interesting. But now I kind of get to do that, and I also get to incorporate my passion into it, where I get to talk about all the social disparities that my communities face and how we can work together. As someone who literally transitioned like in front of some of these kids, this was like, oh, okay, so now what? It was hi, my name is one day, and then when I introduced this idea to them that next week we're going to be doing something different, they didn't bat an eye at it. It was honestly a lot of the parents that were like, I'm going to have to explain this to my child. How do I explain this? And I'm like, yeah, they didn't have a problem with anything. As far as kids being more, I guess, accepting, understanding, tolerating, if you will, for queer folks, I think in my mind, I think a lot of them have a lot more instant access to things. They carry those little squares around in their hands all the time. So if they have a critical theory question about something, they can probably go, hey, Miss Googles, what is this about? Blah, 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 and things like that. Watch YouTube videos, be informed by TikTok videos, hopefully credible ones. And things along those lines. And I think it's just literally the fact that the information has become extremely accessible for them and for us older generations. We had to go to the library and take books out and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, a lot of this language, a lot of this culture is perceived to be new, but we're just now kind of understanding it and adopting it in like our country and our societies over here. So I go out into various parts of community, the Vogue school where, Black and Latinx kids, like they, Vogue down and things. And they're like, come on, auntie. I'm like, oh, no, my knees. I can't be doing that, baby. Can't do that. I go there or go to other places and bars, walk up and down in our queer areas and things like that to try to, canvas and talk to those kids and things like that. Because a lot of them haven't been afforded those opportunities. They don't know how to write resumes. They don't know how to search for jobs because a lot of them are just legitimately in survival mode, which is really, really, really unfortunate. Um, and that's just their experience. And so in our program, what we do is we focus a lot on employment so they can be able to garner those skills. And we give them those skills to be able to go back into community, to be able to do great work so they can become HIV testers, peer navigators, counselors of all sorts and do all kinds of great work in community. So it's very much a cyclical effect. So we focus on that by having career specialists speak to them about their resume, helping them construct it. My direct supervisor has studied public health and he, talks a lot about HIV and things like that. And then for myself, I guess I'm just like the mother counselor person. People always confide in me a lot. I didn't ask for it, but people are just like, I can trust you and I can tell you things. And I also think it's because I'm a Black trans woman, so it's like, oh girl, she's at the worst. Like there's nothing I can't tell her that's not going to make her gag. It's like, no, not really, honestly, frankly. Um, But so I kind of provide that, but I also do facilitations on. I really hone in on gender actually for the entire organization. I do that for our new staff and talk about gender and its intersection, of course, with feminism and things like that. So I really love to do that. And we also go out into different tall skyscraper buildings in the city and educate folks and corporations on like this is what trans means, this is what cis means, and all those kinds of things as well. So it's a really, really great program. It's quite an honor and a privilege to be able to do what I do and get paid for it. Ding. Feminism, in my eyes, is not the opposite of like patriarchy and masculinity and all those things. I tend to think of feminism as an all inclusive, like everyone gets to have everything and be living in a space where they're comfortable, free, and safe, like genuinely on what the principles of air quotes America, which she wants to be, but she's kind of struggling being that girl right now. So that's what it kind of is. It allows women and people who are assigned female at birth, AFAB, primarily to step out of the shadow of patriarchy, and the harm that it's caused. It should kind of just be like humanism, like quite honestly. And so that's kind of what we want is to have. That's what I would love is to see it balanced and yeah, equal is a great word, but we love equity a lot better to where it needs to be. But you know, that's a little bit challenging for folks to grasp because we've been in this system for I don't know forever. So it's hard for people to escape and even begin to think about what that can even look like and things like that. It's kind of hard to conceptualize. Although the Barbie movie, she tried. I did enjoy it and she was fun and I loved her, but she tried, is what I'll say. Since I kind of I when I do my feminism and gender equity and things along those lines, I really try to start at the 101 place. And I know a lot of folks in community are like, I am so tired of having those conversations. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people, a shit ton of people, a fuck ton of people are just now getting to the place where they're like, oh, so calling them the T word is bad. And you're like, great. Now you can start having conversations past that. But if they can't even get to that conversation and get past that without someone being mean and aggressive to them, but as trans people, we have every right to be upset when people call us slurs and things like that. But if they can't even get to that conversation, we can't expect them to start embracing things like language, like being called cisgender and things like that. So I don't mind doing the 101 work. And, you know, as I said earlier, I work with youth. So the most basic and simple breaking down of concepts and educating folks is no challenge for me in that kind of way. My transition actually it started in 2018 roughly, you know, physically as far as that's concerned, all the documentation and medical things and such. So I wasn't involved in nonprofit work. However, I was one of those Twitter girlies who was like, well, whatever she's called now, X. I don't know what she's called. Uh, I was one of those Twitter girlies who was like, and like trying to educate simultaneously, only having a certain number of characters. Therefore, this conversation doesn't really resolve or go where we want it to go entirely. Once I start wanting to channel that energy into something where I'm like, well, let me see if I can get actually paid to do something like this. Let me see if I can take my nurturing, understanding, slightly combative energy and use it in a more fruitful and tactful way. And if I can get a couple coins in my pocket, work. Let's do that. The day I got this job, so I don't know if y'all remember, like back in was it the end of 2020? Yes, it was the end of 2020, and that meme was circulating for Black people where I think someone mistweeted or whatever. They were like, on the 21st of December, Black people are going to get their superpowers, right? And so literally, I had conducted 2 interviews. They were great. I was sitting at home minding my business. I was staring at the ceiling, and then I got an anonymous number that called me, and I was like, I'm going to ignore that. And then it was my current now manager. And then I called him back like right away. And he's like, I just have a couple more questions for you. I'm just like, sure. I don't know what else more you need from me at this point. And he's like, how would you like to have this job? And I was like, it was it was one of those moments where I was like crying and squealing because now I'm just like, oh my God, I have a big girl job. Is this real? Is this what's going on? Is this me? Is it my life now? And I just attribute it to that lovely Twitter meme because it happened on that day when I got that phone call. And I like called my mother and I'm crying and she's like, what? My side note, my mother is very knowledgeable about what being a Black trans woman means now. So whenever I call her and I'm upset, she's always like, oh my God, I'm gonna get there as soon as I possibly can. So she was like frantic until I told her, like once I got through my tears, and she was just so happy for me. And then of course I called my best friends. So I will speak from my experience as it pertains to being a Black trans woman. I've had a very different trajectory from a lot of my sisters in community, and I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing because, of course, it takes all kinds to be able to have these things. But when I'm trying to explain what this literally means is, God, how do you even put this into words at that time period? So a lot of folks understand who they are just because, or because someone has literally told them who they are. Like, oh, you're a woman because of this, you're a man because of this, and X, Y, and Z. And even as us as Black people, we don't conceptualize being Black until a certain age. Like, I think there's this lovely misnomer in community where it's like, oh, you born Black. It's like, yes, but you don't have a conception of what that means until a certain point, like until you get to a certain age. And same thing with your gender identity. No one understands what that means until a certain point as well. And so for me, I trying to explain that specifically without language is one of the hardest things you can ever do. And then this is why the conversations that I have are so important to me, is because I really want to be able to use the language to be able to explain everything. And I want to be able to break it down so they can have a better understanding and kind of move forward with that, because that's kind of where we are with everything that's going on. And so when I was explaining this to my mother, it wasn't like, let's have one sit down conversation and we get it all out. This was a series of conversations, a series of experiences, a series of moments of us really not liking each other and not talking to each other, unfortunately. And a couple great therapy sessions where we really, really kind of went on each other. It was great, like in hindsight. So there will be tension, there will be frustrations, derision, and all those kinds of things because they don't know. Like, it's kind of like expecting a child to know not to touch a hot stove. It's like, how do you expect them to not know that unless you tell them? And then having, and being able to explain it to them, and then more so than that, being for them to be able to comprehend it. I think that's kind of where it gets lost. You can communicate it to your blue in the face, like, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl if you're a trans woman, or, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, or I'm non-binary or gender expansive. You can explain all that. You can communicate and say it to them, but if they don't get it, we're not going to get anywhere. So that was kind of a lot of the conversations that my mother and I had to have. And the way the magic in the world kind of works is that when I did my own podcast, Black to the Future, I was able to sometimes talk with my co-host or a special guest that I would have on, or even just talk to myself because I like to talk to me because we got to counsel sometimes and see where we at. So I was able to do that and then thus be able to explain some of these things out loud. And my mom would just be like, oh, okay, so this is what this is, and this is what this is. And then I also, because I tried to be a YouTuber, and she's hard. That's a lot of work. But I had a YouTube series of a whole 10 episodes called Slay with Xay, where I was a trans tutor for people and gave them basic things. She would watch those videos and she would also share them with other people and stuff like that when they had questions. So that's kind of how I went about it. I was, again, had a great deal of privilege because I was an adult when I started my transition. I started to kind of come into my own grips around 25, like, all right, girl, you graduated college. You have a little bit more freedom. Let's start figuring out how we're going to make this work. And even then, it still took a few years to actually do the medical part of it because that was a little bit scary for me personally. I guess people always feel like you're forcing things. I'm just like, no, I want you to be educated. And an important thing about it is that these ideas and these concepts aren't going to go away, and you're not going to be able to fully ignore them. And I think change and growth, like anything, like when you're a child, change is scary. You know, the one thing that we can bet on in life is some form of change, and we accept it to a fault until it seems like the core principles of who we are now being changed and altered for some reason. So in my experience, in my immediate actual biological family, um, I've always been flouncy and sweet and delicate and all those kinds of things. So to go from the idea of being a young boy to now being a grown woman, some of them are probably like, oh, that's to be expected. That tracks. But will they actually talk to me about it? Will they engage me on it? Absolutely not, because I think the concept and the idea of them being more afraid of making a mistake and saying the wrong thing for some reason, they feel like that outweighs my potential safety and things like that. And I've had to explain a couple times, particularly to my mother, like, girl, you can't be out here like misgendering me and dead naming me when trying to use restrooms or sitting in lobbies and things like that. We don't know who is transphobic, or as Hope Giselle, shout out to Hope, says transmissic, the pure dislike and degradation of trans people. Intersectional feminism is where I stand on everything, where we want to allow everyone, literally, I why exclude people? That's silly. That defeats the purpose. I want everyone to be able to have a seat at the table, have a conversation, and show up as their most authentic selves, because that's what's going to be fruitful and prosper. A multitude of different ideas makes for a better stew, as they say. So having one kind of idea and one conception doesn't do what needs to be done, as Law Roach said on Legendary. Um, so, the idea of TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, in my conversations with them, what I'm perceiving is the fear of men and patriarchy and what they've been subjected to for a millennia. You know what I mean? They are afraid of men taking more things away from them, um, being able to take ownership over things that they perceive that have validated their womanhood and things like that. And so, as someone who's stepping into the world of womanhood, I'm not here to step on nobody's toes. Like, there's no part of me that wants to impede you or hold you back from anything that you want to do. Um, and so I can understand why you're afraid if you've been harangued and harassed and tortured and stuff by men your entire life. Of course, you're afraid of them. And if you don't have a strong understanding of what being a trans woman is, that's where the education is lacking again. If you don't have a strong understanding of it, then of course you're like, oh, well, that's just a man in a dress. That is, RuPaul or something like that. Like, that's something along those lines. Like, they just take it off and just go home and just act like men outside of that. If you don't have an understanding of it, of course you're afraid. Therefore, you lash out and you say things like trans women aren't women, which I always think is so funny because you literally said woman in the sentence. Like, what I'm hearing a lot of times is that they think the word cisgender replaces woman for some reason. I'm like, that means you just don't know what the word means, toots. Like, that's what that indicates to me, is that you just don't know what the word means. The idea that men are afraid of feminism because they genuinely think it's the opposite and they're going to become the subordinates or whatever and things like that. Um, But, like, of course, you don't want to add more to your plate. You got enough shit going on, and now here come these girls who you perceive as men dressing up with as women, saying that they are you, and you validated yourself from being able to give birth, from being able to have a menstrual cycle, for being able to do all that stuff that's just relegated to what your body is able to do based upon your genes and chromosomes and X, Y, and Z. And to me, it's so backwards because the entire concept of feminism at its root, what it kind of started with is like, I'm more than my pussy. And I'm just like, exactly, girl. And the feminism that I'm after is to ensure that everybody is more than what their body is able to do and produce, because that's just part of capitalism at the end of the day anyway. And it doesn't it will not save you. If that makes you feel your womanhood, wear it out. That's great. That's not how I feel my womanhood. And many other cis women don't feel their womanhood that way because they've been reduced down to it. So I just want more womanhood and humanism for people to be able to be themselves at their fullest capacity. And that doesn't take away from anybody else, frankly. I think that feminism in the intersectional sense will help everyone, but even cisgender, heterosexual white men, who are well off and able bodied, all that kind of stuff. I think it can definitely help them because I find that a lot of them are born into a world where they've been at the center, at the helm. Every story is about them, every book is about them. I want them to be able to recognize the fact that you don't have to be what is that? What's Thor's name? Chris Hemsworth or whatever. Like, there's only gonna be one him. You're not going to be able to be him. You can be exactly who you are, and who you are is great and it's fantastic. I think that's what the concept of feminism, intersectional feminism, is allowing more white men to be able to do, is to see themselves in totality and not just what you can procure, what you can provide, um, and what you can like produce, quite frankly. Three P's. So I I really want them to be able to see that and recognize that it can be a benefit to them, and that it's not, again, patriarchy just flipped upside down. That's like the same thing about like how sometimes cishet black men want to flip, you know, whiteness upside down and be like, all right, let's just replace it with blackness. And it's like, that's not gonna work. No matter, it needs to be an equal trade of ideas and understanding and balance and all that kind of stuff. There's so much that we don't know and that we don't understand. And it would be so much better if we collectively kind of came to those conclusions and had those conversations, quite honestly. But when it's been embedded, when it's in your school books, which is why I big eye roll at Florida, when it's in your media, when it's always being put in your face, so to speak, that you see yourself and you feel validated and you feel great. And that's why representation is so important. I believe that white supremacy is the master of it all, unfortunately, and one of the lovely masters play toys is anti-blackness, so that just seeps into everything. It just has its way of doing that, and I think the sooner we recognize that, especially our white peers, especially, and just go like, yeah, this shit is fucked up, how are we gonna fix it? I think them accepting that is very critical, and it happens within the in the feminist space as well, because the idea of what feminism was and how it was kind of constructed at the very beginning is that, white women want to be liberated from underneath men and things like that, specifically white men. And so, during those marches of liberation and freedom for women and things like that, black women, specifically cis black women, were relegated to the back and things like that. And so, your color of your skin, your race does play a factor in it. And so, again, I always tell people that having privilege isn't inherently bad. It's just what you genuinely do with it. And so I think when the world has been completely centered around you and your experience, and to have it shift away from it, it's like, well, what about me? Hold on, what about me? What about me? And it's like, absolutely, mama, we know, but there's other people who are going to need it, and that's what equity is. And that concept scares people, because how am I not going to be the center of something? And that's why I think it's so important to create, like, that's why I love this podcast. You create Black queer centered spaces, and this is very much inclusive of trans women, for which I appreciate. And so the idea of white women, where they be cis or trans, they can definitely have more closer access to what their perception of what feminism is, this Eurocentric beauty standards. You real thin type tees, you got pretty light eyes, you got straight like blonde hair. It's like, let me just go buy a bag if it's gonna take all that. Let me go get some contacts if it's gonna take all that. Like, if I'm gonna get there, let me do it. Um, but, then that's a hard thing for even cis white women to attain. So if cis white women can attain it, and that's supposed to be the gold standard, as it were, Black women, you're not even there. Cis Black women, you're not even there, toots. Like, you're not. And then so for me to be a part of that as a trans woman, it's definitely a challenge, definitely a feat. And I always just think about, whenever we have these conversations about, you know, who can tell who's trans and who's not, and all that kind of stuff. It's always, usually about Black women and things like that. And, who's more manly and who's more aggressive, like Serena Williams, or back in the day before Sierra had that man on top of her every 5 seconds, and we ain't gonna get no music because she pregnant with her fourth baby. Back in the day, Sierra, and then other Black women, Megan Thee Stallion, which thank goodness she's getting some of her justice, for which I appreciate. Um, but those are, tall, statuesque, glorious Black women that are cisgender, but they're relegated to being like, oh, they're this and this and this and this. When I'm like, Iggy Azalea is taller than me. Taylor Swift is taller than me. But you know why they get to have that magical pass is because of their whiteness. So if I come to a white woman and tell her, like, "Oh, hun, you have privilege," and that's not a bad thing. Like, you've got it. Like, so now what are you gonna do with it? Are you going to, call the police on somebody every 5 seconds when something doesn't go your way? Are you going to say obscene and rude things to me now that you've whatever, because you feel like you able to do that? So I think it's literally about having those conducive conversations, but moreover, it's about the willingness to listen and to understand. And one of my favorite activists, and shout out to Diamond Styles, who hosts Marsha's Plate podcast. She always talks about, if you center the least among us, you always manage to get the effects you want on the outside. And so I think that's kind of where we need to genuinely be coming from, is make sure we focus on the least among us. So that means I'm well above being privileged, because I'm here having this conversation right now with you and all that kind of stuff. So we need to be focusing on trans women who are, homeless, that are not able-bodied, are in a very obviously low socioeconomic status, dark skin, and all those kind of things. They are much more out there being subjected to horrible, violent things. And you're like, I'm a white woman, my husband treats me bad. I'm like, girl, okay. And I think for them, it's hard to conceptualize that kind of thing, because, you know, that's scary to think about, but that's literally someone's reality. Some of the kids that come into my program, that is their reality. And as someone who does have more privilege as a Black trans woman, doing these kind of conversations and being able to help those kids get access to things is one of my favorite things ever. And it's legitimately about being able to have the willingness to listen. It's funny because I think that a lot of white women, whether they be cis or trans, want white men to hear them and to understand them. And you need to do the same thing, sweetie. When Black women are telling you things, you're going to have to open up those ears and be okay with saying, like, okay, well, this is fucked up. This is bad. This is shitty. Like, and all that kind of stuff. After you acknowledge it, what are you going to do? You accept it and then you advance. Triple A's. No Alaska, no Willamette, no Courtney Act. Triple A's. You acknowledge, you accept, and then you advance. So that's what you have to do.
All right, y'all, that was Xay Day, and you can find her on her podcast, Black to the Future Podcast, and her handle is Pink Princess _Xay. That's PINKPRYNCESS _ZAY.
XAY.
XAY. My vision was my brain was not braining at that moment. Pep, we covered a lot there today. We covered a lot today.
We really did cover a lot. And for me, the takeaway, we hear about all these things in the news about, like, again, racism and anti-Blackness, or, anti-Semitism, all the antis, transphobia, homophobia, all these things, misogyny, patriarchy. And, like, I don't know if there's a graph or if there's like a tree or like a pyramid chart. But it really shows that, like, all these things, all these isms are working hard for the same purpose, of, it seems like the end game in the United States for a lot of the end result of a lot of these things keeps cisgender or heterosexual white men who are not disabled at the top. Like, that's what it seems like the purpose of all of these things to do is. I'm not demonizing white men. I'm not saying that they're not, I'm not doing any of that, but I'm just saying this system.
I am.
The system, the result of these, all these actions, the system seems to be working towards that. And so feminism is key, but it can't just be feminism. It needs to be the not that it needs to be my idea of feminism, but it needs to be a type of feminism that is not protective of that system, but also a feminism that actually works to dismantle that system and is more intersectional. I learned about something that they are calling white feminism, which I'd never really heard much about, but my connection to what I would call white feminism really is connected to the TERF ideology and J.K. Rowling, because when she talks about wanting to uplift women and do all this stuff for women, it doesn't seem as though she's using an intersectional lens. It doesn't seem as though she's considering that, like, women have come from different socioeconomic situations and that women, different issues impact women of color differently than they do white women. I never hear her address that. And that never became more clear during Black Lives Matter when I heard her say nothing about it. And then when abortion was struck down in the United States, I heard her say nothing about it. Like, I think since then she has addressed it because people called her out on it, but she was going on and on about women's rights. And then when abortion was struck down, she's like, what's the weather? And so, like, what's up? And so it really highlights that white feminism, that's what I thought white feminism was. It was a feminism that just ignores Black and people of color, women of color, but it's not so much. I've learned, there's a lot more to learn on white feminism, but it's feminism that uses and works within the system of oppression, like patriarchy, to benefit the woman who's trying to get ahead. And so instead of saying,
well, it's aligning herself, it's her proximity to the patriarchy.
Exactly, to the patriarchy, which she already has a close, she's already pretty close to it. But instead of saying we need to change the rules so that all women earn the same amount as all men and change it that way, instead it's like, let's just make sure that this woman gets a promotion. And so it really is very exclusionary and exclusive, because it's not inclusive and it's certainly not intersectional. So yeah, but
Yeah, when you have white intentional feminism, which we call whiff, so you get a whiff of the farts. When you get a whiff of the farts, you don't want that in your life.
Black
All right,
man
thank you
in
all.
a dress. That's right. Black man in a dress. What?
Woke man,
I said
woke man
black
in a
man.
dress. Black man
Oh no!
dressed up in
No, I'm
drag,
a fart.
up in pumps. Black bitch up in
Yeah.
pumps.
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh. Anyway, we want to say
well,
thank you
well,
to everybody listening. Make sure that you go check out Woke Man in a Dress by Bob on their YouTube, or just better yet, just go ahead and join the Patreon and check it out. And we want to say thank you to our executive producer, Tracy Marquez, senior producer, Charlene Westbrook. Congratulations, Charlene. We're so happy for you. Producer, Kori Nixon, and post-producer, Amelia Rittaler. And of course, music by La Femme Bear. Thanks, everyone.